and this is the Quarantine Interviews. I have a terrific guest today. He's a professional guitarist. He's a commercial guitarist. He plays guitar, classical guitar, banjo, mandolin, dobro. You name it, he'll play it. He's played in dozens of Broadway shows, including Chess, Les Mis, Tommy, The Lion King, Secret Garden, and he was just playing Aladdin before COVID-19 hit us. And he'll tell us the inside story of what it's like to be playing in a Broadway show when the lights go dark. He's played with artists such as Audra McDonald, Chico Hamilton, Sutton Foster, Ashford and Simpson. You're wondering who he is. He's a veteran Broadway guitarist. His name is Kevin Kuhn. Hey, Kevin, how are you? Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too, Al. I'm good.
Great. Terrific to see you today. We haven't seen each other in quite a while, and these interviews really have brought me closer to a lot of my old friends, my old buddies that I work with, and also a lot of new guests that I'm first meeting now. And I just want to say hello. Your reputation really, is outstanding. You played some of the top shows, and a lot of them were your own chairs. And what that means to our guests means that you were the first guy to develop that chair. So your signature sound and all that is really what made the sound of the guitar what it is in those shows. So I'd like to touch on that. So Kevin, why don't you give us a little idea of how you started in the business, and and then we'll work our way up.
Sure. I was a student at what was then called the Philadelphia Musical Academy, which is now the University of the Arts. And my great friend, Patrick Mercury, who was, I think, 2 years ahead of me at PMA. Well, we were both in, they had two jazz bands at PMA that were directed by Evan Solat, who just recently retired. But at any rate, Pat was doing most of the shows that would come into the Forest Theater. And in the summertime, when the Philadelphia Orchestra went on tour, I'm from Philadelphia, by the way, so that's a given. When the Philly Orchestra would go on tour, that would open up the Academy of Music, and they would book a touring show in there for the whole summer. So I think my first show back then was, might have been Man of La Mancha, one of the original productions. Yeah. And the summer, it was Fiddler on the Roof.
So you had mandolin chops together by then already.
Oh, yeah. Mandolin and mandola. Actually, first guitar, Ed Flanagan was playing the mandolin part, but I had the mandola, which is like a big mandolin tuned like a viola. Wow. It wasn't a big part, but it had a bunch of doubles, and it was a lovely score. Yeah. And then after that, they started to book some two guitar shows. The first one was They're Playing Our Song, which was at Mercury again. And the second was the First National Company of Evita came through Philly and sat down for 6 months, at which I guess the last couple of weeks we were there, the conductor, who is now the head president of Las Vegas Musicians Union, Jack Gaughan, asked me if I would like to go to Toronto for the summer. And it was basically more money than I'd ever seen in my life at that point. So I said, yeah, right. There, and spent the summer there. And then actually first we did St. Louis for 3 weeks. Then we went to Toronto. I think we went from there to Seattle, and from Seattle to Boston. And we stayed in Boston for about 7 months, I think.
So you crisscross around the country, from to this side. Yeah. Incredible.
And then when I came back, I'd been out of the Philadelphia area for so long. I was sort of dating my now wife of going on 36 years this time? 35. That's good. And I moved up to New York with her, and one thing led to another.
So let me
Actually,
ask you this question: Do you come from a musical background? Because you're so musical. Were your parents involved in music at all?
oh yeah. My dad was a bass player in the Army band, uh, and he also played guitar. He was good friends with Johnny Smith and Tel Farlow,
Oh no!
but he was mainly known as one of the arrangers and composers for a record group called 101 Strings.
Oh yes, I remember that record. Of course.
Yeah. Oh, there are literally hundreds of them.
Yeah, yeah. I didn't mean that record, but of course.
But in fact, he used to use Johnny Smith's when they recorded in New York. This is back, I guess, in the late 50s, early 60s. Johnny was living here. And he was like the top call guy back then. So, yeah, I mean, my dad was and my mother was the prima donna for the Philadelphia Opera Company.
Incredible! Wow.
But my parents, both my brothers are musicians.
Both your brother. What's your brother's name? I know the bass player.
That's Dave.
Dave.
And my brother Joe was principal percussionist for the New Jersey Symphony for many years. He's out of the business now, but he was when he was living here in New York. He used to have an apartment on top of Stryker's on 86th Street, and he was doing the symphony. He was subbing on a bunch of shows, and I think he just got a little weary of the business and moved out of town. But yeah, so my parents. In fact, I still have my dad's guitar, which is a 1946 Epiphone Emperor, which is it's the Freddie Green guitar. You know, it's like a Super 400, no cutaway.
Wow.
I remember once I was playing a show up at the Schubert. It was I think a Hoagie Carmichael review called Stardust, and it was just acoustic archtop guitar, and Tom Oldakowski was playing drums on it.
I know.
He turned around to me one time and he says, "Hey, can you turn down a little bit?" Turn down what? He says, "Turn down the amp." I said, "I'm not plugged in, Tom."
There is no amp.
That's the loudest guitar I've ever heard.
That's the way they were designed, to cut through a big band, right? With no amplification.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
I actually saw a picture of Freddie Green with an Emperor, and he had the strings almost 3/4 of an inch off the fretboard. Nobody could play his guitar. But he got that sound, you know?
That's incredible. So, well, you come from such a terrific musical family. That's incredible. And that, of course, that instills it in you. Were they happy that you obviously going into the music business? Were you always ready to go into the music business?
Yeah, pretty much. You know, unfortunately, my dad passed when I was very young. I think I was maybe 5.5, 6 years old. So I never really knew him. But, you know, I always had the guitar, and I was always encouraged.
So you're carrying on his legacy in one way or the other, man. It's touching. I got the chills. I'm sorry to hear that. Yeah. So, okay. So now you played a bunch in Philly, and usually what happens, I know the Forest Theater. I played there with a tour of a chorus line, which was one of my first shows, and we settled there. I think we did 3 months there or something like that. So that's a great stepping stone, because at that time I met the conductor was Sherman Frank, who
Yeah.
Right, and he did something else. I met him from Superstar. We did that, and then he did Chorus Line. I toured there, and then I came to the city. So, is that kind of the progression from these off Broadways in other towns? Now you're going to Toronto back and forth with this other show. So, how did that develop into you really settling in New York and with those shows here in Broadway?
Right after I got back off the road, I was still living in Jersey outside of Philadelphia, but I was coming up to New York because Michelle, my wife, lived up here, and she was a textile designer. So we started living together, and then I was looking for work, and I was also commuting. I was playing I played in the house band at Playboy Club for a little while, and in a couple of the lounges. I was going back and forth to Atlantic City. And I ran into a guy named Glenn Alexander, who you might know.
I know the name, and not personally, though.
Yeah. He was playing in a little jazz club in Philly, and he said to me, he goes, "Oh, so you just moved to New York?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "You know, Chico Hamilton is looking for another guitar player. I just left the band." So he gave me the number of Carrie DeNigris, who's not in New York anymore, but Carrie was his guy then. And I called Carrie, and then Carrie said, come on over and play. And then, we played together for a while, and we both had a background of having studied with Pat Martino.
Sure. Greatest. Poor Pat. I mean, didn't he? He got very ill, or and then he couldn't play, and then he relearned how to play, and now I hear he's not doing so great again, unfortunately.
Right now, that's right. Well, I've known him since I was in college, and I used to go over to his house on 16th and Rittner in South Philly and study with him. Oh. And the first time he got sick, it was a brain aneurysm.
Oh, that's what it was.
Basically, I think he and John Mulhern were out in L.A. Pat was sort of in residence at the Guitar Institute of Technology there when he had a seizure, and they flew him back to Philly, and it turned out he'd had an aneurysm. So they had to go in, to his head twice, I believe, with lasers. And the end result of that is it kind of wiped his hard drive clean. And he relearned how to play by listening to his own records.
His own right, and he was one of the greatest, jazz players.
And up until just recently, he came to he'd been touring so much he got a respiratory disease. That's not related to what we're seeing now, but he's been unable to work since 2018. So the GoFundMe page for him,
So anybody hearing that, of course. Please go to Pat Martino's GoFundMe page and donate. Yeah. He's a legend in his own right, and so well respected. Yeah, could use your help. All right, so let's take it from there. So now you have a friend getting you into Chico Hamilton.
That's right, and that was and at the same time I was also pursuing subbing on shows. I think with Chico, we could do like a week at the Blue Note. But then we'd have to go out on the road because it was in the contract that you couldn't, if you played the Blue Note, you couldn't play anywhere else in New York for a couple of months.
Sure.
So he had a big blue van.
You call it in the record business the radius clause.
Yes.
Because this way you're not competition for yourself.
Yeah.
And the promoters, obviously. So,
yeah. Interesting story about Chico. Now, I've been with him for years, and then he had a falling out with his management team, and he had to cut it down. I mean, it used to be, when I was with him, it was me and Kerry, 2 guitars, and then the great Arnie Lawrence, who's no longer with us, but his son Eric, I believe, is playing Up a Storm. Arnie Lawrence and Eric Person, who's still making great noise all over the place. And then Paul Ramsey was playing bass. At any rate, times got tough, and he just went down to a quartet. However, I was still running I had a 1/2-inch 8-track machine in my apartment in the East Village, and I was doing demos with lots of people. And Chico still had his finger in the commercial world. He used to do documentaries and some jingles, back in the 50s when his cool jazz sound was, really all over the place. So he came down one day, and we were in there doing a Civil War documentary with Tio Macero, the great producer.
Oh.
And
from the Miles, Tio, didn't he produce?
Yeah, Miles and many other people.
Yeah.
In my little 1-bedroom / studio apartment in the East Village.
And it was a studio.
Yeah, it really was a studio. I had a Fender bass sitting in a stand, and he says, in his gravelly voice, "Gaz, I didn't know you played the bass." So I said, well, I don't hire out as a bass player, but I play well enough to play on my own stuff, So the following day, he was playing at a place called Carlos, which was right across on 6th Avenue and 9th Street. He calls me up, and he goes, "Kev, you got to come over to the joint and bring the bass." Well, I didn't even have a bass amp, so I brought my Fender Deluxe, and I promptly blew the 12 out of that. But I had the added advantage. I forget who was playing bass at the time, but whoever it was either got lost on the way or didn't get the phone call, whatever. But I had the advantage that I knew all the music. But the difference is that you know, he would always turn around and yell at you, you know, the old school jazz thing. He's like, leave some space, leave some space. But on the bass, it's like, if you leave some space, the whole bottom drops out. So it was like the total opposite.
One, don't leave out the one, leave out the two for the guitar player.
But it was, I actually used to have to, because he had a couple of different modes, and one of them was a real fast, old school swing, not a bebop thing, but dang, 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 like, yeah, but, you know, tempoed the bone fracture. And every set I would have to take an Allen wrench and set the screws up on the bass, because it just vibrated so much. So I eventually discovered Loctite. Put that on those tiny little Allen screws, and that solved the problem. But yeah, I did that for almost 5 years.
Wow, incredible.
In guitar and bass. I think the last 2 or 3 were on bass, and the first 2 were on guitar. But we always stayed friends. He was a great guy, great education.
Yeah, when did he pass? I know he's no longer.
3 years ago.
Only that recent. I mean,
I think fairly recently. I'd have to check, but he lived, I think, to be about 96 or 97, and he had a quadruple bypass at one point, and he lived a couple of years after that.
Incredible. All right, so you with Chico, you're subbing now on some Broadway shows.
Yeah.
So how did that develop?
Well, I'm trying to think. I'll tell you how. I had when I got back, I was friends with Steve Margocious.
Oh, Steve Margocious. Yeah, I know well.
He used to come through Philly as a conductor, and he came through one time. I was also in the house band down at the DuPont Theater, the DuPont Hotel in Wilmington, and I played pretty much all the shows that came through there. I once did a show called Eubie, which was of Eubie Blake and Noble Sissel tunes.
And that came to Broadway too.
Yeah, it did.
I subbed on it. I forgot the guitarist's name at the time.
Yeah, I forget. Well, I was doing it, you know, for the traveling production, and they had a house band there. But the cast was Cad Calloway, his daughter Liz, and Hines and Dad.
Right.
And their father. The band was on stage, and Hines and Dad had this routine where they literally would come up this ramp and jump over the band, feet moving in the air. It was, I think, a music director, it's a guy named, is it Lloyd Johnston?
Yeah, that's it, I think.
MD for Sammy Davis, something like that. But that's some fun times down there, I'll tell you. Right. But when I moved to New York, I called Steve, and he said, I'll give you a phone number of a guy to call, but give it a day. I want to call him first and tell him to be nice to you. And that was, of course, Scott Cuny.
Oh, another Broadway vet.
Another Broadway vet who you should hit up, by the way. Because, anyway, a little tangent here was, so I talked to Scott, and then I did sub on the New York production of Evita shortly before it closed, when I did a couple of shows for Robbie Kershaw.
Robbie, I was going to say, I work with Robbie too. Right, so it was him and Scott in the pit, the two of them.
It was him and Scott, or maybe him and Andy Schwartz.
Oh.
I forget. I forget who was the other guitar player. I think it was Andy Schwartz.
Yeah, you think it was Schwartz, and I think it was Scott. Maybe the day I was there, whatever.
I think it was Andy's chair, but Scott probably a lot of time there too.
That's right. Our Broadway, for our guests, subbing on Broadway, you could, at that time it was about 50%. You could take off.
Oh, so, yeah, and it still is.
It's still,
as far as I know, all bets are.
If you go back to Broadway, you'll find out.
That's right.
So it's considered part of your 50% right now.
Yeah, right. So another side thing that happened when I moved to town, I was playing with another guitarist who I lost track of, just playing in little coffee shops, guitar duo. And I had been, my major at PMA was classical guitar. And I always had it with me. Evita had a nylon string part on it. And I always took my repertoire from college with me and practiced. So I was talking with my friend, and I said, I'd like to continue to study classical guitar, but I don't know any teachers in town. He goes, well, why don't you call Fred Hand? I said, you mean Frederick Hand? He goes, yeah, Freddie Hand. I said, where does he live? He goes, he lives around the corner on 101st Street. So I called him up, and I went over there, and I took a lesson, and I had been playing his 4 excursions for flute and guitar for years, and every time we go to a new town, I'd get the flute player and say, look, let's play these because they're beautiful. And so I asked him, I said, are you the guy that wrote this? He goes, yeah. So anyway, we started hanging out, and then I get a phone call. And he had asked me, what my experience was. I said, well, a lot of shows. I did the opera in Philly a couple of times because, the Barber of Seville's got a little guitar part. So I get this phone call one morning around 10 a.m., not too long after I met Fred. He goes, what are you doing? I said, I'm just sitting here having coffee. He goes, do you think you could get down to the Met Opera in an hour to cover me for a rehearsal? Because I forgot about the rehearsal and the fact that I had a student at the same time. So I went down, I covered the rehearsal. And it's a great story. It's the whole orchestra's playing, and then everybody drops out. It's just the tenor and the guitar player.
Perfect.
And it's not a difficult part. It's a couple of chords, So I'm playing along, and afterwards, the conductor, who was Italian, came over to me. He goes, hey, buddy, he's beautiful, but you gotta follow him because he's no follow me. It's just, at one point I'm looking up at him and he gets this look on his face and just puts the baton down.
Oh, just, you and him.
So anyway, after that, I started covering at the Met for Fred. And eventually he says, hey, I think I have a gig for us. And this is 35 years ago. He goes, they've decided to add another guitar and another mandolin to the production of Otello. And talk about 2 pages of music. And at first, we were behind a scrim. And then they decided to up the game a little bit and put us on stage in costumes, which of course meant that you had to memorize the 2 pages of music.
Right.
I have been doing Otello at the Met Opera for the last 35 years.
Oh, still?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously. So
Yeah,
they have productions of that once a year? How do they do that?
They rotate it, but it's part of the repertoire. So it comes around once every season and a half.
Yeah. That's great. That's beautiful.
So then Fred says to me a couple of years ago, he goes, I think I have another gig for us at the Met. He goes, but I don't know what a tamburizza is. What's a tamburizza? I said, I don't know either, but I'll find out and get back to you. He goes, well, whatever it is, we need 3 of them. And they come in sizes. So I looked it up and I called, remember those guys on 4th Street, the Music Inn?
Yeah, yes, I do. Yes.
Yeah, so where am I going to get a tamburizza? So I called them up and they said, well, we don't have a tamburizza, but we got its kissing cousin, which is a saz. Now, a saz is a Turkish long-necked lute, which is nowhere near related to a tamburizza. A tamburizza is a small Balkan-style mandolin. Right, and they have 3 strings, and depending upon what section of the Balkans you get your tamburizza from, it's either the top 2 strings are doubled, or the top, the second and third. But at any rate, so we get these things. Now, a saz is microtonal. It's got, they have their modes.
Right, yeah.
So, and they have little tie-on frets that that look like a craft wire, gimp we used to call it. But at any rate, we figured out, we had to put masking tape on the side of the neck of the thing, and it's pear-shaped. It's big. It's like a bowl-back mandolin. And the little one's this little, the middle one's this little, and the big one is like, comes up to your neck. So we get down there, and we get the part, and we figured it out. And it was for me and Fred, and then he brought in Peter Einhorn from his neighbor from Woodstock. Oh, we got it together and we went in. The conductor was an English guy, Sir Andrew Davis. And we played it for him, and he laughed a little bit. He goes, well, I've got good news and bad news. I said, well, what's the good news? He goes, you've got the job. I was like, that's great. What's the bad news? He goes, the part's twice as fast.
Oh.
It's like that was what we were playing, and it's actually a fast dance where they're throwing mandolins at each other.
Getting back to
yeah. So I mean, but I mean, he was very funny about it. Yeah. So that got me into that world. Now, I do Othello, Merry Widow whenever it comes around, and occasionally we do Moses and Aaron, which is a mandolin part, and it actually has two mandolins and a guitar backstage. No, it's two guitars and a mandolin backstage, and then two mandolins in the pit, and that's a very, very difficult part. In fact, it's unfinished.
Like nobody could get through it. Why is it unfinished?
Well, no, he died before it was finished. This is Arnold Sherman. Yeah, but one of those parts that because it's 12-tone music, it's not easy to hear.
Yeah.
I went to the source recording and I listened to it, and I finally realized the guy in the recording is actually playing a mistake. But who would know?
Who would know? For Kevin Kuhn.
Yeah,
I mean, that's a whole good.
Yeah, that's it's just a whole different aspect of that, and playing an instrument like the guitar with an orchestra is, especially a symphony without a rhythm section, is just a whole different animal.
Yeah, it's really beautiful too. Really a terrific experience. All right, so that's a complete cry away from Broadway and rocking through shows like Tommy, Lion King. So how did you bridge the gap from playing in operas and that classical over to the Broadway scene?
Well, you got to practice a lot.
How do you get to Lincoln Center? There you go.
I mean, my background is in I started playing guitar literally listening to The Who and to Hendrix and The Cream and Eric Clapton. In fact, I've ruined the needle on my mother's good Garrard turntable by how we used to learn guitars. You take the needle and you pull it back and say, let me try it again. You try it again. And finally, in frustration, my mom used to come, her vocal coach lived up here in New York. So 2 times a week, she would get on the Amtrak and come from Philly to New York. And one day she came back with a pile of records. She goes, if you want to play the guitar, listen to these guys. Your dad was friends with a couple of them, and she had bought Johnny Smith records and Tal Farlow. She goes, listen to these guys. It's it's a different thing. It's a different sound from the one you're making right now. So I did, and that opened up this whole world of to me, and I got to know Johnny a little bit because back, I guess it would have been 72. I was a sophomore in high school, and I think Guitar Player magazine had just come out, and I saw a little ad, Johnny Smith Guitar Seminar. So said to my mom, this is the same guy, those records you gave me? It was a friend of Dad's. She goes, yeah. So she called up Johnny and spoke to his wife, Sandy, and agreed that it would be okay for me to come out on my own as a 15-year-old. And so I went out there for a week, and Johnny's guest for that week was Chet Atkins.
Wow.
I had breakfast with Johnny and Chet. It was a Holiday Inn, right, that had like a little coffee shop diner, with the stools up there, like in a soda fountain. I had breakfast with those guys every day for a week.
Oh, man.
What they were talking about was right over my head. I had my little SG special in a alligator cardboard case, and I had hair down to my shoulders, and I was trying to grow a mustache, but I hung on every word. And to this day, I think I still have a copy of the Johnny Smith Approach to Guitar. And it's interesting because Johnny's whole thing was like, if you really want to be a guitar player that can read, you need, the guitar sounds an octave lower than it's written. Mm-hmm. So if somebody hands you a chord or a piano part, or, just sheet music is usually piano and vocal, because you need to be able to read the bass clef. And that always impressed me, because then when you ever see like something like the Three Penny Opera or anything that Kurt Weill ever wrote, the guitar is actually written in the bass clef, and there are no chord symbols.
Yeah.
So that's always like can I have a pencil in an hour? You know, just to sort of suss this out, you know. And it's funny when you talk about doubling. Now I don't sight read it quickly, but tenor banjo,
Sure,
tenor tuning, is actually very key for some of the old Gershwin. Certainly, anything Kurt Weill ever wrote. And Gershwin, I mean, he wrote a bunch of stuff that was for tenor banjo. And if you try and play it in guitar tuning, you can't.
yeah.
It's like play something written for the mandolin in fourths tuning. Doesn't work.
And it doesn't sound right. I mean, the instrument is made to be in fifths, like, and you know, it just doesn't sound right. People that tune regular guitars or banjos to guitar tuning, and plus it's not as high and it's not as
right. It's not as high and it's not as low. You know. So, you know what? There's somebody just popped into mind that I used to play with all the time, and she's kind of a movie star and a terrific jazz singer, Lainey Kazan.
Sure.
I played with Lainey for years, and I met her at Playboy in Atlantic City. And a great bassist from Chicago, Tom Mendel, I said, "Hey, Lainey wants to meet you." And I think Phil Markowitz was her piano player at the time, great, terrific jazz piano player. So I went up to her dressing room, and she goes, "Well, I've got a bunch of dates, you know, and we go on the road, and you know, they would. She had like big band charts, but she would like to keep her rhythm section, which was Eddie Cacavelli on drums, and oftentimes Tom Mendel would accompany her on the road. But she was one of the most naturally gifted singers I know. I mean, she never warmed up, and she would just go out there and sing, and it was like it's like doing a jazz gig with a really, really hip singer. Right. And she, in fact, she had a series of rooms at all the Playboy clubs across the United States called Laney's Room, and they were jazz clubs. Yeah. You know, and you'd go in there and you'd see whoever was playing, like George Coleman, or you know. But that was a fun gig. I spent a lot of time doing that. Mm. And another one where one day I was doing something with Eddie Cacavelli, and it was the time I was playing with Chico, and he says, "Hey, I just got a phone call from Lainey. She needs a bass player." I said, "Well, you know, I actually play electric bass." And then I was playing electric bass for Lainey for a couple of years. But I draw the line at trying to play upright. Mm-hmm. That would require serious chops and practice. It's a whole different issue.
So we got Lainey Kazan. I'm still getting us into the Broadway scene. So what was really your first Broadway show?
My first Broadway show was a thing called Late Night Comic. And that was a guitar bass chair, right? And it was one of the other people that actually was really important in helping me get started in New York was an arranger named Larry Hockman.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. And Larry had been in, we did a whole summer in Philadelphia at the Walnut Street Theater with a show called Do Black Patent Leather Shoes Really Reflect Up? And it was this whole thing about Catholic school. Well, Philadelphia's got a predominantly Catholic community. So it ran forever down there. I think we ran for something like 40 weeks. And then they brought it back again. They used to get busfuls of nuns. Now, I went to Catholic school, so whenever a nun would stick her head over the pit and say, "Which one of you is Kevin?" You automatically cringe. Right. Yeah, it was around that time that I actually, halfway through the first run, I got called to go over to the Forest Theater to do Evita. And after that, I left town. That was supposed to be the summer. It turned out to be a year and a half, you know?
All right, so you got to Broadway. You had Margoshes, you mentioned before. And now you're trying to get into the Broadway scene. So that was your first show. And how did that spiral into some of the other great hits that you played? Well,
you know, after that, then I sort of became a a blip on the radar screen for guys like Scott and Brian Kuhn. And the people that I had been on the road with Evita with, Keith and Pam Phillips. Keith is no longer with us, but Pam is still kicking, and she's out in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. Anyway, they were doing this off-Broadway show called Diamonds. It was a musical about baseball. And, it was weird because I had done the backers audition for it, but somebody, Steve Usher, do you know Steve?
I know the name, yes. Yeah.
Yes, actually the guitar player.
Right.
He left to do something else. He left to do a show called Smile. And then I got the call to take over for him. And that ran for a while. That ran for, I don't know, maybe about 6 months. And that was great for me because I was living in the Village at the time, and this was in Circle and Square. And so I could walk over there. So that's, I started getting that. And then I'd been subbing a lot. I was subbing on Les Mis. That was, I subbed 2 shows at Les Mis, and Brian had a hit with Buster Poindexter, Hot, Hot, Hot.
Oh, yeah.
Calls me up. It's like, we're going on the road. Can you do the next 2 months? I'm like, yeah. And at the time, Scott was, I think it was around that time, Scott was, Kuhn was doing Big River.
Mm-hmm.
And he was busy. There was session work back then.
Now, didn't Margocious orchestrate Big River?
No, that was, come on. He's one of the orchestrators on Aladdin.
Oh, yeah.
I'm blanking. It'll, if I don't think about it, it'll pop into my mind.
Let's go on. All right, so now you're doing Les Mis. You got to sub there for a bunch of months. And
yeah. And I basically took over for Scott on Big River for the last, I don't know, maybe 2 months, because he had a lot of stuff. He also plays a lot at the Met and with the Philharmonic. He had a bunch of legit dates, and it was getting too crazy for him. So I got to pretty much take over for the last couple of months. And I think he just came back in to do closing night or something like that. That was a long time ago. But yeah, that's when I started getting, calls. Like I said, my first call was this show, Late Night Comic, which was so poorly received that the best review I read of it said that Philip Rose trying to take his credits off the remove his credits as producer from Late Night Comic is something like the captain of the Titanic trying to take his name off the ship's log as it went down. One of those opens on Thursday, closes on Sunday type of shows. But that was at it was called the Ritz then. I think it's the Walter Kerr now. But they were building the Holiday Inn next door as we were in the pit, and they were blasting. And we'd be sitting there, and the whole building would shake, and plaster would fall on us. It was like, are we going to live?
Right. It's OSHA when you need them.
Yeah, exactly. So then I was hanging around, and somebody said, Chess is coming into town, which has got a great guitar book. You have to do this. This is your stuff. So I said, gee, I don't know who the contractor is. And they said, it's Mel Rodman, who was the contractor for Cats, R.I.P. Mel. He's a lovely guy. I love Mel. Anyway, so Jack Gaughan, who, like I said earlier, is now the head of the Musicians Union in Vegas. Jack Gaughan was the guy that hired me to do the Evita tour, and I contacted him when I got to New York just for some help. And he was great. It's just a super guy. So guess what? I called him and I said, do you know who's contracting Chess? He goes, it's Mel. I'll give him a call. So he called for me. And then I called Mel, and his wife answered the phone. I said, Jack Gaughan recommended that I call about the Chess show coming in. She goes, I'm pretty sure the chair's been filled, but give me your number. And he took my number. An hour later, the phone rings, and it's Mel. He goes, I need for you to be at Carol's on, I guess this was on a Sunday. He goes, Tuesday at 9 a.m. And here's what I want you to do. I want you to buy the record, and I want you to listen to the solos. I forget which 2 tunes it was, but one of them was Nobody's Side. Anyway, it had Van Halen style two-handed tap.
Finger tapping.
Yeah, And when you see that written out, it looks intimidating. But I learned it by ear and memorized it.
Oh,
so I went in there with, I had a, what did I have? I had a Kramer with a Floyd Rose on it. And I went in there with my pedal board, and when it came to that, I just nailed it, And I got the phone call, and he says, you've got the gig. So that's when I started getting calls for stuff.
I think that's when I met you, believe it or not.
Yeah.
I took the audition too, and you got the gig. But then you let me sub for you. I subbed a couple of times on it.
Yeah, well, a couple of times would be it because it didn't run very long.
That's right. And it wasn't an easy part to sub on because, as we'll tell our guests, when you sub on a chair, so Kevin learns the book, knows it inside out, and then as a sub, you have to come in and play the show like that chair does every night through.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it is a tough job being a sub on Broadway.
Yeah, the nicest compliment you get when you sub on a show is none.
None, right.
Yeah, it's like you're expected to go in there and sound exactly like the guy that you're subbing for.
Meanwhile, you want the conductor to send you flowers at the end.
Exactly. That's like, no, you're not getting flowers, buddy.
I remember subbing for Scott Cuny on Sound of Music. There was like so many instruments, an auto harp, even a zither.
That's right. That had a zither.
Zither. I learned the zither for 2 months. I go play the show. I'm out of breath. I played it. And then he goes, just play that one backbeat a little tighter, please. And he walks away.
Oh, that was Rafter, right? Mike Rafter?
Yeah, I said, I wanted this guy to give me flowers and a hug, man. Do you know what I did to get through that show? And that one backbeat, please make it a little tighter. And he walks away.
Yeah. Yeah, that means you did a great job. But I got to.
All right, let's keep going because we'll be out of quarantine by the time we're done with this interview. Is that the goal? So I could shave? Come on.
Yeah.
All right. So you did a Chess, which was a monster show, really a great guitar book. So how did that spin into like shows? I'm sure our audience would like to know about, say, Tommy and that kind of stuff into Lion King. So get that in the interview.
Tommy is a great story. We were doing, I guess my second call was for The Secret Garden, which I believe was one of the first shows to have a guitar synthesizer on it. And the guitar synthesizer was a tricky bit because the technology was not good back then. And I had to trigger it from an acoustic guitar, which meant that I had to put nickel wound strings on. I had a big Guild Dreadnought, but with nickel wound strings, and you had to change them frequently because as the strings died and became false, the triggering became inaccurate. And also because it was pitch to voltage, the lower the pitch, the slower it tracked. So you actually had to fool some of the patches by transposing them like 2 octaves too low and then playing it in the high register.
Wow.
Transposing it super low, and then if you played it, in above the octave or
articulate better because you play it higher.
Yeah, it would track faster.
Right.
The pitch, the actual pitches you were playing were coming out 2 octaves lower, but it was triggering the mechanism faster. So anyway.
Well, that's a mind trip in itself because
exactly
top of your neck, you hear a bass.
So we're in the pit, and the now famous composer Janine Tesori was assistant conductor and playing the piano part, the synthesizer keyboard part. She goes, they're doing Tommy by The Who. Do you know that? I said, no, yeah, I know it. That's kind of how I learned how to play guitar. She goes, well, they're taking it to La Jolla Playhouse. Are you interested? And I think at that point, she was sort of sounded about it. I said, yeah, when does the bus leave? So a couple of weeks go by, and I don't hear anything. And I said, Janine, what's going on with Tommy? She goes, I'm not sure. I had another project come in that I had to say yes to, but Steve Margoshes is the orchestrator. So I said, I know Steve. And so I called Steve up, and I said, Steve, how do I get on this gig? He goes, well, I'll tell you what. if you help me with transcribing some of the guitar parts, then I think I can hook you up. And he goes, there's a guy named Joe Church, who's the conductor. I said, oh, I know Joe he used to sub in the Les Mis pit.
Mm-hmm.
So I called up Joe and I said, Joe, I'm dying to do this Tommy show. He goes, well, it's going to be a big guitar thing. I said, yeah, I know. And I've got a list of 50 guys that want to audition. I said, fine. What time? How's 5 o'clock at Monday? And I said, yeah, that's fine. He gave me his address, and I said, what do you want to hear? He goes, well, there are 2 acoustic guitar things that are pretty big. One is the Pinball Wizard. I said, uh-huh. He goes, and the other is this solo called It's a Boy. I said, well, hang on. And I put the cordless phone down. I went and got my guitar, and I played it. He goes, oh, wow, you really do know it. Because I just thought of you as a nylon string guy from Les Mis. I said, oh, no, that was my thing back when I was a kid. My brother and I could play it pretty much from top to bottom from memory with this drummer we knew. So he goes, okay, well, 5 o'clock Monday. I said, sure. About an hour later, the phone rings. He goes, it's Joe. I don't feel like listening to 50 guitar players. Do you want the job?
There you go. That's the way it happens. There it happens.
Yeah. And then my brother Dave was living in LA at the time. And he was he had been doing a lot of extra work in films, and he had an agent. Joe calls me up. He goes, there's this guy in LA. He's got the same last name, Dave Kuhn, and he's got a big resume as a bass player in music theater. I said, that's my brother. He goes, do me a favor, call him up and see if he wants the gig, see if he wants to come down to La Jolla for the summer. And wound up being the guitar and bass on that.
Oh, that's terrific.
Yeah.
So then it came back to Broadway, right? Obviously, it was a big hit on Broadway.
Big hit on Broadway, yeah. I guess I did it on Broadway. And then Janine took a production of it over to Germany, and I went over to Germany with it.
Did you? Will you get to hang with Townsend at all?
Oh God, yeah. Right. In fact, just this past October, they did a big one-night-only concert version of Tommy to benefit the La Jolla Playhouse, and Pete played with us.
Oh yeah, terrific.
Yeah. In fact, we did. Previous November, I guess, 2018, we started this thing with Donnie Kerr. I don't know if you know Donnie, but Donnie was in the cast of Tommy. He's the guy who sang Pinball Wizard. Oh. And once a week when Tommy was running, every Thursday night, we would do a thing at the China Club with Pete, with rhythm section from Tommy, me and Dave, and either Joe or Henry or Ted Baker, and Luther Ricks, our drummer. Every Thursday night, and Pete's idea was that he wanted to get the cast members to get a feel for what it was like to play with a rock band, because a lot of these people had theater backgrounds. Yeah. So every Thursday night we would do this concert, and it was under the heading of Rockers on Broadway. So after Tommy closed, once a year we would get together and do a theme, like the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, and we did it all for the benefit of Equity Fights AIDS Broadway Cares. And so the last one we did in November 2018, or was it 2019? It was, they did one in 2019 too, but I couldn't do it because I was at the ballet. But 2018 was, I think, the 25th anniversary of Rockers on Broadway, and Pete came, and we did a whole set of Tommy tunes playing with Pete.
Oh, that's incredible. All right, so
he also came to La Jolla gig too, and played with us.
So that's a terrific experience. From there, you mentioned Joe Church. I know if we move a little further down the line, you got into Lion King, which is also one of the all-time great shows. And I know Joe Church was the conductor for that. So is he the one that helped you get into Lion King?
Absolutely. And in fact, initially, they didn't want to put a guitar book in it. Mm. And from what Joe tells me, he basically said, you got to have a guitar, and you got to use my buddy Kevin. Wow. And, at this point, it's not, I think these days, it's not really, if you're a rhythm section guy, if you play keyboards or guitar or bass, it's really not so much the contractor anymore. It's the conductor, because he wants to start with the guys,
who he wants to play with, who he wants in his chair.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's like John Miller once said. He goes, everybody in New York can play. He goes, but the A-list guys, the double A-list guys are gonna be subbing out all the time. He goes, I'd rather have an A or B list guy that everybody wants to go out for pizza with, because the band will sound more consistent.
Chemistry of that band.
Yeah, it's all about the chemistry.
So Lion King, now, what a terrific show that was. And I mean, you had an all-star band in there also as well.
Totally. That was one of the best rhythm sections I've ever played with, for anything. I think originally the bassist was Luiko Hopper, who's famous for everything. And he had done, I think, something like 10 years with Bringing the Noise, Bringing the Funk. And he did, I think, first couple, maybe 6 months of Lion King. And then he took a leave. And when his leave was up, he came back and played a couple of shows and said, I think I'm done. Had a good run. So he turned it over to Tom Barney. Who's been, Tom Barney, Tommy Igo, Ted Baker, and me, and originally Joe. I was there for 17 years.
Yes, incredible.
I had a heart attack during that time. I was also the house contractor there. That's a big job, and that was one of the last large orchestras on Broadway. I think there were 23, and each one got 2 subs. I don't know if you've ever done a payroll for a band, but it's a lot of work.
I was the house contractor for Grease, but
that's right. Yeah.
9 members in the whole band doing payroll. So,
yeah, it was, and my phone never stopped.
Of course.
Yeah.
And I was lucky enough to sub for you for many, many years. You gave me plenty of work over there. It was terrific, just trying to fit into your style and using your guitar. Usually you might bring your own guitar for these, but it was always better to use yours. So at least you set up with the sound and the instruments that the chair has. This way, as a sub, you go in. At least that's what you got going for you. Everything else, of course, you have to get going. But the actual sound, a different guitar will bring a different sound.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. That's key. Is that's advice for subs. It's you got to be a scientist that way, and unless it's impossible, you've really got to get comfortable with the regular's rig.
Yeah, and it's not easy. So I'm sorry. So you had a heart attack then? Wow. And so how long were you out of the? We're out.
Not long.
Oh no.
Maybe a couple of weeks. In fact, I was in Ann Arbor, Michigan, at the University of Michigan, which is a lucky thing. Now, it turns out that a heart condition is congenital for me, because I don't smoke, and that's a biggie. But I was lucky enough to be about a mile from the University of Michigan Hospital. I was out there sort of doing an artist in residence for Cynthia Cortman, who had been our assistant conductor on Lion King, and she got the job at University of Michigan. So she brought me out to help with their production of the Full Monty. Sure. And so, I was playing in the pit, but I also had, 2 guys sitting there at any given time, guitar students watching me. And I was giving private lessons from my hotel room. And the Saturday night before the last Sunday matinee, we all went to dinner. I took the kids out to dinner. To this Mexican place. I woke up the next day thinking, man, don't get Mexican food in the Midwest. My God. And I know these guys thought that hot sauce was the bomb, but I got heartburn. So I get to the theater and I'm starting to feel peculiar. And I had a little bit of flat coke from the previous night under my chair, and I drank that and I felt better. And then my left arm starts to hurt, and I start sweating out of the soles of my feet. Now, luckily, my stepfather was a doctor. He was a surgeon, and he used to spend a lot of time in the ER. And he said, listen, as you get older, if you ever feel like you have bad indigestion and your left arm hurts, get to the ER, because that's a heart attack.
Oh, my God. Yeah.
And sure enough, they called an ambulance. And I'm sitting there, and they put the portable EKG on me, and the lady says, you might want to lay off the Mexican food because I don't see anything here. I said, do me a favor, take me to the hospital. I want to go. I want to get thoroughly checked out. So we're halfway there, and I light it up and start driving like hell. I said, what's going on? The nurse turns around. She goes, you were right. You're having a heart attack. And, I got there, and, they hooked me up. And the guy said, well, he said, another 10 minutes, and you'd have been gone, man. Because how did you know? I said, my stepfather was a doctor. He warned me.
Incredible. Wow.
Who was it? Kenny Brescia had a heart attack, but symptoms weren't so severe. He said he walked around with it for a couple of days and finally went to the hospital. But
Kenny, well, what show did he do? Oh, Rent. He did that
for years. Yeah.
I got to play that too. I think he lives out near me in Ridgewood, New Jersey.
Yeah, he does. I know he's in somewhere in Jersey.
Guitar player too. All right. So I don't mean, look, I could talk to you all day, all night. Great stories and really a terrific insight into the Broadway scene. I know you've played also, we talked about other artists, but I guess we focus more on the Broadway. So after a while, you had that, you left Lion King, and now where were you just recently? You were just with Aladdin. Yeah, and I was actually the conductor for Aladdin is my dear friend Michael Kozerin, Koz as he's known. And we were out in San Francisco with Jane Krakowski from 30 Rock. She has just a wonderful singing voice and a great nightclub act. And we're having dinner. He goes, Kevin, they're bringing Aladdin to Broadway, and it's going to have a guitar chair. Are you interested? I said, yes, on one condition. He goes, what's that? I said, I don't want to be the house contractor. I don't want to help the house contractor. And I don't want to hear my name used in the same sentence with house contractor. Because that's the house. I said, I just want to come in and play and go home, Yeah.
And
that was the music. That's Alan Menken, an old friend of ours, Alan Menken. I remember doing the first show that he wrote years back at Michael Bennett, the choreographer from and we did this show called Battle of the Bulges. It was space and three women with big behinds, and it was the worst thing ever. And that was the year 1980 when John Lennon passed away, and we all did a memorial. And then right after that, never went anywhere. He ended up writing Little Shop of Horrors.
Yeah,
and that was it. And then there goes Alan Menken. What a legacy behind him too now. All right, so you're with Aladdin now, enjoying just playing a guitar chair, chilling and playing. So that's bringing us to the point of our conversations, right? So really, the quarantine interviews were really about getting in touch with musicians, friends, and new friends, and how it's affecting the business. So obviously, the show is dark now. Broadway is dark now. How is this affecting you and you think the Broadway scene altogether?
Well, I'll tell you, I don't see it coming back before 2021. I mean, realistically, when you think about it, who is going to want to? I mean, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry, but practically speaking, who do you think? And because the New York area seems to be the epicenter of the COVID-19 problem, who's going to want to get on a plane, travel 1,000 miles to sit in a theater with 1,700 people they don't know, right next to them? Right. So I think when it does open up again, it's going to be totally different. And I think they're budgeted so that they sell every single one of those seats every night. I don't know what's going to happen. I really don't know.
And no producers, anybody talking about anything right now, or it's, hey, take a break, go on unemployment, and
well, I'm certainly
you.
I'm taking unemployment and thinking about putting my papers in for my pension because I'll be 64 in October, so it might be time. And plus, what's it? I work with Lee Musiker. Lee, piano player.
No, I don't know Lisa.
Uh, he was with Tony Bennett for years. He played pops, and he likes it from the piano. He turns around and he goes, "There is no business." You know? But he's been doing that.
Speaking about the union, we'll wrap this up also, but the union was talking about taking your pension.
Yeah.
I'm on that same age. I could take it a year early, and it's 64 also. We could both sing McCartney's tune when
Yeah.
before, but our pension has been cut from the union.
Yes, well, we just don't know how much.
Well, quite a bit. I mean,
What we don't know is whether or not the proposed cuts are actually going to happen. It hasn't been approved yet.
hasn't been, so they could cut more actually.
Or they could not cut it at all, and we'll run out of money in 20 years, you know?
Okay, well, 20, 64, 84. Well, okay, we got a few good years.
We've got a couple of good years. Yeah, no, it actually has to be approved by the government. It's got to be approved by Congress.
Okay.
Yeah, so the thing you got in the mail is just what they're proposing, which is why everybody, I mean, you know, Andy Snitzer and Paul Lamont actually sued them and won.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you're following that. They won like $26 million after lawyers for both sides get their share. I don't know what's going to be left, but it's going into the fund. I don't think it's going to make much of a difference, but it's the point of the exercise.
Right. Okay. So pension. All right. So, well, maybe it is a good time because you don't know, because you're primarily, I know you do recording also, but primarily a performer.
Right. Yeah. I had a great run. I was sort of on staff at Shelton Lee Palmer and with Gary Anderson at Score Productions. I had two studios that I worked out of. And, you know, in 1990, I'd go out of the house at 9 o'clock in the morning and I'd come back after a show at night at 11. And that was my life. And it was great. We used to do, back when there were jingles, we did jingles. At Shelley's, we used to do, actually with Score Productions, we used to do a lot of music for the news, like MSNBC. And I mean, both those guys kept me pretty much busy for about 10 solid years, I would say. But that business is no longer, you know, or it's taken another shape, you know. I mean, everybody with a computer and a good haircut is writing songs nowadays, in the words of Pete Townsend.
So just to wrap it up, because we're ready to wrap up.
Okay.
Give us a little advice for maybe up and coming Broadway musicians, and also a little bit of inspiration to help get us through the hardest time. Although I do see the light at the end of the tunnel, they are going to open it up. But like you said, it may not be the same on Broadway.
There will, you know, and the one thing I have to say in that regard is that no one person has the same path. And I myself didn't have a game plan. I was more like water seeks its own level, you know, and I just kind of went wherever the wind blew me, and it blew me into some great places. And it's a lot of it's about personal integrity, you know. Never try and cop another guy's gig, you know, and people do that. It surprises me. Just be on time, you know. Always have a pencil. 2 is better, you know.
Sharpen too. Make sure.
Yeah. 2 is good because somebody will have forgotten theirs, and you'll have one to loan them. You know, just be on time. Have your fingernails clean. Like I said, nobody has the same path to it, and you pretty much do make your own opportunities. One thing, I've done a couple of talkbacks at Disney, because sometimes we'll get somebody's high school band and they want to talk to the musicians. Mm-hmm. And here's one thing I think is key that a lot of people don't know, and I discovered it almost by accident. Find out who's doing the work that you want to do. Call them up and see if they teach. Mm. You take a lesson, you know, they're going to charge you $150, $200. It's the best money you've ever spent, because that way that guy gets to meet you, see what type of person you are, and hear you play. And who knows, you might learn something, you know. But I mean, that's what happened to me inadvertently with Fred. You know, I called him up and took some lessons, and next thing you know, I've been at the Met for 35 years.
Well, you're going to have so many students after this hits the end. Is that you're just trying to get some work out of us?
Not really, but I mean, it's sound advice.
Are you teaching online? Just ended. Are you teaching online now?
I haven't up to this point, but you know, I'm certainly open to it.
Might be a good way to go. A lot of people are going into.
Yeah, a couple of friends of mine are doing it, but right now I'm actually sort of enjoying having the time to sit and practice and write. I've been writing a lot. You know, in fact, I just got a new computer, and I've got a very old version of Digital Performer, and like the FireWire connection, it works flawlessly. However, my browser is so old, I can't actually even get an email or send a file. So what I have to do now is get a USB, an old-fashioned USB to the new, what do they call it? USB-C, it's a tiny little USB plug. So I can
get to. Yeah. So your last inspirational line is, give me one quote.
You make your own luck. You know, you really do. And always be prepared. Always be ready to jump. You know, because you never know when the phone's going to ring, and you never know when that phone call is going to change your life forever. I've had that a couple of times, and always for the good.
Terrific. Kevin, I want to say it's really been a pleasure. I know you for so many years, and now I got a real inside story of why your reputation is what it is and really is exceptional. And no, seriously, I know you a long time, and you were always one of the top calls on Broadway from what I know. And it is because of that camaraderie, that chemistry, and of course, you know, great playing. And now we see your background of how you really came to be. It's really a pleasure, man.
Well, thank you. Pleasure talking with you too.
Yeah. So once again, I wish you and your family well. You know, we'll get through this. You know, and all's good. It's really a pleasure. I'm sure we're going to have a great audience who's going to love this interview. Really. And I'd like to say, Kevin Kuhn, you are a terrific veteran Broadway guitarist, but I don't mean veteran like you're out of the business. You know, a lot of vets are because they come back, but because of how much you've really done on the Broadway scene and everywhere else where you played, the Met and all that stuff. So, you know, power to you. It's been really a pleasure.
Thank you, Al.
Yes. Okay. So thank you very much, everybody. It was a great interview with Kevin Kuhn, guitarist extraordinaire, and one of the nicest guys we know. I'd like to say thank you. I'm Alan Cohen, and this is the Quarantine Interviews.